like to welcome everyone tonight to the Farmington School Board meeting. It is September 28th. Would you all please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic. Thank you. So we'll open up next on our agenda is public participation. I don't know if you have anybody here or anybody online that has any questions or concerns.
We do have the phone tonight as well, so if anyone wants to call in directly, that number is 755-2811, extension 2104. And if you are calling in, when you hear the auto attendant, it will ask you for the extension. That's when you put in the 2104.
You do have a teacher at this time, Heather Lavasser, who would like to make a comment. If you'd like.
Yes, go ahead, Heather.
Thanks. Hi, thank you. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to say a very big thank you to Mr. Brown for his very generous donation of the outdoor seating pads, which are due to arrive on the 2nd. Mr. Brown, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate your generosity, and we will definitely be putting those to good use as soon as they arrive. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else with any public comment? Not hearing any, I will leave it open as much as I can throughout the meeting. Next we have illustrious police chief Jay Drury here, and our SRO officer. At this point, I'll turn it over to Jay.
I wanted the chief and Officer Webster here, just because there was a transition period between when Tom McNulty was SRO and Officer Webster came in. We've also had a change of boards in between, and nobody's really said welcome to the community. And I wanted you to hear from, I'm not going to speak for the board, but I'm going to speak for myself. I want you to hear as a resource officer that we're happy to have you here. And as a board, obviously within the memorandum of understanding, we set up a communication chain, but if there's issues, we want to know about it through that chain of command so that we can fix them and make this one of the best and safest schools possible. But I wanted to say welcome, and I appreciate what you do, and from what I've seen, you're doing a very good job.
I'll also echo that, and I'll go back a little bit in history. I mean, I was on the Board of Selectmen, not for this memorandum of understanding, the one prior. And when I was on the board, there was issues. The school wasn't happy with the product that they were getting. And Jay was involved in this, and on that side, no, they're our customer, and we need to sit down and we need to work through it to make sure we're giving them what we said we're going to give them. And that second draft was revised, and I think that we obtained a better customer satisfaction and quality service to the community. And in this last one, I think that we've hopefully had continued to make some improvements on the agreement, but mostly all of the working relationship that we need to have so that we can be successful as a team. I've worked with Jay before, so he hopefully should know that if anytime that there's an issue, you should just pick up the phone and say, hey, we got an issue. Because I think we're all we all have the same goal. It was very important for me to have a school resource officer. I mean, there was some talk, not in this MOU, but in the prior one, between the school and the town, where they were considering not doing it. So at that time, I tried to do my best to make it successful. So I think we've hopefully been making progress and continue to make progress of working together.
Thank you. I think it is going well. We have communication quite often between a bunch of us, and I think it's definitely progressed, and it's also allowed the school resource officer to partake in some events where we're trying to be seen in each school as much as we can. Obviously, with the conditions of COVID, it's a little bit more difficult, and we have to be a lot more careful. But Antoinette was able to do some stuff where bicycle helmets were given to some students at Valley View recently. We had a bike raffle where submissions were chosen for a boys and a girls bike. The traffic and the crosswalk assistant, I know the captain's out there at the end of Thayer Drive quite a bit, as much as he possibly can, so we can keep the flow of traffic going as best we can. And we'll continue to do that as long as weather allows, and if nothing comes up, we should be able to continue to do that to help expedite people in and out of the campuses.
Oh, it's been much appreciated. It's done very, very well.
And then we even have a photographic evidence of Antoinette assisting with a music class at the Valley View. So we didn't know her musical inclinations, but apparently she can play the bongos quite well. So.
I don't know about quite well, but she plays them.
So it's things like that that go a long way, that the children of the community can see that, we put a uniform on, but we're also people too, and I want to make it so that we are as approachable as we possibly can to the community. And I think if the children learn that at an early stage, as they grow up, they'll carry that with them, and when they need a police officer 20 years from now, they won't be afraid to call one. And I hope that is part of what we're trying to accomplish here, but also trying to provide security for the campuses of Farmington.
Chief, when does the grant run out? And is it a January, December grant, or does it run on our fiscal year from July?
Neither.
It's a mess.
Okay.
Normally it happened in October, but it ended up getting bumped back to November.
So it's a November 1 to October 30 grant. It doesn't hit either of our fiscal
Okay.
years.
Yeah.
So we're in the last year where we have to fund it next year, or we
Correct.
have to reimburse all that money.
Right.
Correct.
So we're getting ready to go into our budgetary act. I'd like to, through your process and your communications, have identified areas where we may be lacking. For instance, do we have an office for you yet?
I share one with the dean of students, because usually when we sit down with students, it's something that we're
That you're together? Okay.
anyway.
Do you spend a lot of time in your car?
Yes and no. Lately with COVID, I do spend a lot of time outside the buildings, just
Okay.
because a lot of the kids are outside too.
Is computers or mobile data terminals on the police department radar anytime in the future, Chief? I know probably not this year with the way the budgets are going, but
Correct. I think they will eventually happen. I am just not satisfied with them yet. And I had way back,
the Panasonic tough
probably
books.
12 years ago, I had a bad experience with them where they wouldn't connect, and they were giving us all kinds of grief, and we were losing reports, and officers were writing a report 2 or 3 times. I know the technology has come a long way, but I'm still perfectly fine with handwriting summonses and handwriting notes and paperwork, and then typing it when we have the time back at the station, or in the SRO's position, she can type it on the laptop and then transform it into our data system. The other problem we're having is our record system is about done. They're not supporting our current record system anymore.
Okay.
So I think we're going to be end up going to the same system that state police has. And I apologize, I don't recall the name of it. They just started that system, and I have a feeling we're all going to be going to that in probably the next 4 or 5 years. And as you're aware, we're part of the county system, which is great. So I think it's going to end up just being a big catch-all when they decide to switch us over.
Interagency, yep. Okay,
So-
good. But equipment is one of the things, you know, I know some things I'd like to see you have. I'm not going to say it out in a public meeting because it deals with safety issues, but, you know, you're in the buildings every day, you're dealing with the calls every day, you're seeing stuff that we don't see. So just kind of keep that communication process open, so if we do run into problems, we can fix them.
I will say that issue that you had asked me to take care of was delivered last week,
Okay, good,
so.
good. And thanks for coming, I really, you know, appreciate it, and I think it's important that the public put a name with a face and...
Do we want to have
So
Antoinette
Officer
come up
Webster,
to
would
the-
you like to
so we
step
can
up to the mic and
say hello? And
say hello? And
A little
I'm sure
history.
you have a couple comments and maybe a little history on,
I don't trip over all the cords. That would be nice. So I am Officer Webster. Where am I supposed to be looking?
the camera's there.
There's the camera.
Oh, okay, there it is. I'm like, I don't know where I'm supposed to be looking for this. Yeah, what would you guys like to know about me?
So how long have you worked for the town of Farmington?
For the town of Farmington, I'm going on 3 years.
Okay, and did you work in police and law enforcement before that?
Yes.
Yep.
So I worked in Lee for about a year, and then I started off part-time at Madbury. So I was there since 2011.
And this is your third year at Farmington?
Mhm.
Hopefully you plan on staying.
Yes.
And this is your first year doing the SRO position?
This is going into my second year.
Second year. And so what was the differences from what you expected the job was going to be to what it actually was? Some of the things, like some of the good things that you didn't expect and some of the things that you didn't think you'd be dealing with?
Actually, quite a bit of it was sort of what I was expecting. I expected some of the kids to kind of be a little hesitant to a new face and a new person in the position, and with everything that takes time and trust and developing a relationship, especially when they see somebody in uniform or somebody that can be an authoritative figure. I think a lot of them are hesitant. So, I mean, I expected it to take a little bit for the kids to warm up to me, and it's the same thing with adults. The relationships have to be formed. You have to take the time to learn people and get to know them. So, I mean, much of it was actually exactly what I expected.
Yeah. So, seeing you're on camera and some parents that will be watching this, if you had one thing to say to parents of students in this community regarding your position, what would it be?
If you get a call from me, it's not always something bad. So don't always expect the worst when you see the phone number pop up or you hear that the SRO is calling. For example, today I called 2 parents and let them know that their child won a bike. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of people instantly assume when I'm involved that it's just immediately bad. So don't always assume the worst.
Good, good. Well, on behalf of the board and the school, I'd like to thank you for your service, and I'm glad that you've decided for a second year.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joel, Josh.
Joel, Josh, do you have any questions or comments?
Well said. Just thank you for what you do. Appreciate it.
That's from Josh Whitehouse. So I do appreciate both of you coming, and without any further ado, I'll let you guys go to work.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thanks again.
So,
Thank you for coming.
Watch the cords.
I know.
Too much paperwork to fill out otherwise.
Next on our agenda, we have meeting minutes. We have meeting minutes of October 31st, public and non-public. Do we have a discussion or a motion?
I'll make a... Just bear with me, I lost my place in the computer, I'm trying to find the agenda.
Yeah. We just got bumped here, so.
So I'll make a motion to accept the meeting minutes of October 31st, public, and also non-public session 1, 2, and 3.
Second.
Seconded by Josh Whitehouse. Discussion?
I do. I'm looking at non-public session 2. It's not sealed. Second line down, it says Mr. Brown didn't have time to read the agreement.
That was because it was late being put in the folder, so
Yeah, but it
we
makes it
should
look
clarify
like,
that.
it makes it look the way it's there, and I think...
We
you
should
know, if you
clarify
add
that,
in-
definitely.
Add in because of the late submission or something to that
Yes,
effect.
absolutely.
5 years from now, it's going to be more
You're not doing
What
your
was he
homework?
doing?
self-explanatory. And that's the only issue I have with all the minutes.
Anyone have any concerns about the proposed amendment? Not hearing.
Love it.
Any other discussion on the minutes? Not hearing any discussion. All those in favor of accepting the minutes as amended?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. Next, we have meeting minutes of September 9th, public session and non-public session 1 and 2.
Motion to approve is written.
For all three?
Yeah.
We have a motion to approve all 3 minutes, sections of minutes. I'll second it by Joel Shagnon. Any discussion? Not hearing any. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously. Next, going to updates. We didn't get a list of any updates. That was late breaking. I didn't get a chance to get those to them, so I guess we're just going to take the list off the top of the things we've got going on. So go ahead, Ruth Allen.
Okay, Ruth, do you want to do that piece, Larry, first? Since you saw them most recently?
Yeah. Hi, Larry Gordon.
Yeah.
The roof has been vacuumed off.
Good.
It got finished this morning. The company didn't arrive Saturday when they were supposed to. They arrived Sunday. So, and they got a late start. So it was finished this morning. All the material was delivered from the roofing company, and it's now on the roof. They craned it up to the top of the
Yep.
roof. They didn't start today because the forecast did not look really well for them.
Yeah.
So,
I think it may not clear up till Wednesday, or is it going to be okay?
Wednesday's supposed to be the heavy rain.
Oh.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So the foreman that's in charge of it told me they may be in on Saturday to start.
Okay. Well, once they get here, I'm sure they're going to stay on until they get it done. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, they do have to work around the weather, and it's probably to our best interest.
Yes.
Yes, we don't want it opened up and then,
No. That's good. No issues so far?
No issues. No, everything went well. They showed up. They had 2 flatbeds with all the material on it. As soon as they pulled it, and they were just finishing with vacuuming. The trucks
Yeah.
pulled in, and then right
So the
behind them.
vacuum materials they took off-site, or they deposited
No,
on
they
it?
deposited with the
Okay,
other material that we had here from the last job.
okay.
So if anybody needs rocks, let me know.
We got some free rocks. I'm going to take some of those free rocks sooner or later. It's like working in my schedule. What else do you have?
so, buildings, we're pretty much, in the same spot that we've been. We we did take delivery of the additional desk shields that were supposed to be in Monday. Those did arrive Tuesday. We are seeing improvement in our numbers of students who have the screeners done in the morning.
Okay,
And I don't have today's numbers. I know toward the end of last week, they were trickling down to very few. I've
Now-
received exactly 2 emails of comment on it. One was, great, love this, and the other was, this is ridiculous. And so I kind of, played the gamut.
so far, we're, 50/50.
We're 50/50 on that, yeah.
Do we have any situations based upon a directive of the board last week that that need to,
We have none at this time.
okay, so far, so good.
So far, so good, yes.
Okay. Next one, I got a question on safety upgrades.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think we have that on the agenda, right?
No.
So I just figured where we stood with that.
They're probably gonna start next week. They're gonna give us at least 48 hours notice so we can move what we need to move.
Yeah.
We're kind of hoping they might be able to scoot it up while Henry Wilson was remote. But right now
Yeah,
it
we've
doesn't
tried
look
to
like
do
that's
that,
gonna
but
happen.
they have a job they're working on now that they can't get out of before the end of the week.
Yeah.
So I would foresee next Monday probably is when maybe next time we meet, we'll probably be discussing what they've done for the day. But they did say they'd give us at least 24 to 48 hours notice. We can at least move stuff. We have to move stuff to certain sides of the room. We don't have to actually move it out of some of the rooms. So
Okay.
that's for Henry Wilson. I mean, the other ones are the easy
Easier.
So
ones.
it's in process.
Yep.
Hurry up and wait.
Well, yeah. Other people have other responsibilities to do.
Yep.
We like to say, we know we're the most important customer, but we're probably not their only customer. Any other quick updates?
No date yet on technology. We should be getting an update later.
That there may be another model that may be available sooner.
It looks like they may have a mix of models when Jen spoke to them last, and we said, just tell us what you've got, and, we have some latitude to take a mix. It doesn't all have to be the exact same one. It would be a mix of models that we already have, so it's not going to add additional layers of complexity to what we're trying to support. But we haven't heard on that yet. Probably Wednesday will be our next update.
The technology question, I was going through minutes prior to the meeting. There was a notation when Mrs. McElhenney was elected that the board bought a spare tablet for the board. We've had a recent change in board personnel. Was that practice of issuing computers to board members discontinued? Do we have everything back that we were supposed to have back?
I have Mrs. McElhenney's tablet. I do have two others. One of the spares we did repurpose because we needed
That's
it for
fine.
nurse's office.
Yep.
But we do have if there's a need.
But we have all back in, everything that belongs in district is in district
It
now?
is.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Tim, on updates?
I think I'm good on updates.
Okay, anything else, Ruth Ellen, that you can think of that's not
I
on our
think
agenda?
that's probably the gist of for right now.
Okay. Oh, I did have a question.
Okay.
I was at the Board of Selectmen's meeting before I came here, and I said to Arthur, so when are we getting together for a joint meeting? He goes, I don't know, I'm waiting to hear back from you guys. So I
Well,
said,
he'd sent it to both of us, and I assumed that you would give a date, and I
Oh, yeah.
got busy, and so we both
Yeah.
got busy last week.
okay, so I didn't know if you guys had worked one out tentatively.
He just said, tell me when, and I'll put you at the front of the agenda.
Yeah, they said they're
So-
meeting every week also, so I think it's
Do we want to look at next Monday?
I'm okay with next Monday.
Okay. I will.
Josh and Joel, your thoughts?
That's fine. Sure.
We'll start at 6 o'clock with them,
Okay.
and then we'll delay the start of our meeting until, I'd say, 7.
So are we going to, I can bring internet down there, are we going to be able to, we'll be on their TV, maybe use a phone for our board members? Do you want to do the call-in
Why
conference
couldn't we
call?
just use their number and their,
Because I don't know whether you can have 2 or 3 board members call in on their phone.
oh, you mean for our
Right,
members?
we
I
may-
thought you meant public input.
We may need to have call-in on yours if you can bring the Bluetooth.
That's what I meant. I
Yeah.
can bring the Bluetooth
That
if we
would
can
be
do the
helpful.
conference call with the board
Right.
versus, and they can, well,
I'll be present.
Okay.
okay.
So then it would be potentially 2 calling in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, we'll have to just kind of plan that in advance. Try to get there early to make sure we get our technology going,
Okay.
us novice drivers.
Yeah.
So we'll set that up with the Board of Selectmen
Yep, I will email.
Under new business, I was going to bring it up under budget, but as long as we're on new business.
Well, we're actually going right to budget, so next. So budget?
You can leave it on the updates or whatever. The DRA forms went out today for signatures.
Yep.
The first one on the list was our school clerk,
Right.
who only works part-time at the town hall from here forward, so she doesn't have access to that email out of the office.
Okay.
And I had called her and said, hey, what email are you using since you're retired? Because I saw the tax collector email on there. She happened to be at town hall, and she logged in, and she got it, and it got signed.
Okay.
But now that she's not full-time on the town side of the government, does it make sense to do an SAU email address for her so we can communicate across ours for any right-to-know requests, et cetera? And pretty sure, setting it up now isn't going to be an active utility, because I'm pretty sure she's going to rerun for at least one of the offices.
That's easy enough to do.
Yeah, I think that would make sense.
Yeah.
It would just come to her title.
Yeah, buttons up the communications
Right.
between her and
Okay.
us. And the same thing if Mrs. Cardinal doesn't have one?
I believe she does.
She has the
Yeah.
treasurer one.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
See, an SAU one.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, I'm good.
Okay.
Okay, moving along to budget.
You had listed in our brief discussion last week that the areas that you were looking at were curriculum, technology, facilities, staffing, and then just kind of the overall fiscal pieces, whether you were looking at a percentage or a flat, or where you were going there. So I didn't list everything because Charlie and I didn't get a chance to really talk about some of the pieces, but I know that those were things that you were looking to kind of get captured. So I wanted to just kind of put those back on the table and see how you wanted to structure that.
Go ahead, Tim.
I think I'll start out, and I think it's no secret, based on the budget committee meetings, that as a community, this is going to be a tough year based on the COVID-19 expenditures. Depending on what the federal government does, we don't even know where we're going to be headed budgetary-wise on that as well. So my priority in formulating the budget, what I'd like to see is a zero-based budget. And I want to see our first part of the budget as we go through our process of being what we absolutely need to run our school system. What I'd like to, and again, I'm speaking for myself, not the board, but within our budget, there's a certain amount of money implanted in there because we cannot run down to a zero budget. You need a buffer and a budget to run a budget. I've noticed that a lot of that money is in senior teachers leave. We hire younger teachers. There's some money in medical, FICA, those type of expenses. What I'd like to do is calculate out a cost per employee, what we're paying now. We have to have that buffer for an employee has a baby, they now go on the family plan, somebody gets married, whatever. But I'd like to bring that bulk that's within the budget into a school board contingency line. That's the money that we generally don't spend every year. Consistently, every year that I can remember since being on the budget committee, we return approximately $500,000. So that line should be visible somewhere. So we're telling the taxpayers, here's the money we need to keep the cash going. That's going to come back to you or roll over the following year. And here's what we absolutely need to run our educational program. Then as we're going, I'd like that to be the first step of the budget. And then as we're building the budget, what are our priorities and what are going to be our expenses in educational enhancement? The one thing that I heard, and I knew it was rough on some of the prior school board members and some that are with us here, but the one thing I heard at the public budget committee meeting from the taxpayer is, I don't mind investing in my schools if I get a return on the investment. So as we move forward with our programs, I want to budget to them, identify what benefit it's going to have for the community, and how we monitor it, so we can report back the next day and say, this is what we get out of it. And then just kind of move in that direction. We talked last year about some cuts that we didn't make because of COVID-19. Those should be back on the table. I'm not saying the board's going to cut them, but, and again, you mentioned non-public, but I think those should be brought forward, and kind of move in that direction. A little bit different this year that I want to discuss with the board as a roundtable is, once we have Fund 10 established, as we're making changes to that, do we want to make change in the first year in a warrant article and let the taxpayers identify what they want for a school system? The negative aspect to that is taxpayers could say no, and no means no, and it's off the table at that point. But the advantage is as I look at our strategic design and what we're trying to do, we're trying to bring in the community and let them define our school system. And part of that is the budget process. So I think if we dot our I's and cross our T's and put together a program that makes sense to the taxpayers, they're going to come on board, or we're going to be able to sell it to them most times. If we get sloppy, then it's going to fall through the cracks. And I think that's the way to do it. So say, I'll use an example with the social worker. If we run out of funding, if that grant dries up this year and doesn't get renewed, is that a decision that we make, or is that a decision that we bring to the taxpayer to make and sell it to the taxpayer? So that if they say in a warrant article this year we're going to fund it, next year we roll it into Fund 10, because they've kind of proved that expansion is my thought process. But I'm just talking out loud.
But is the timeline, say if you just use that position as an example, is that timeline going to work based upon our timeline?
It may be difficult because, while we'll know how things are going, we're going to need to have decisions made on whether or not any position is included by the end of October. And so for us to, certainly we'll have an idea there, but to say this position or that position, particularly if it's a new one.
Well, say if it's funded by grant that may not be funded, when would we get those answers? So that we can.
All we're going to be able to do is do basic projections. I'm not going to have all of my grant funding. I don't have all of my allocations now for this year to know exactly what I'm going to have. And so for me to say what my allocations will be next year, my projections have been pretty close. I've had some happy surprises that a couple of them we got a little bit more than we were expecting. But most of them, as I've seen the downward trends, that's pretty much where we've gone. I will say on our staffing, the way that we budget is based on current staffing coming forward. We do have changes, but I don't put in extra. It's current staff. If everyone stays, here's where we'll be at what they have currently. And so while yes, we do have changes each year, sometimes the changes are in the opposite direction, where I have someone leave and I end up bringing in a more seasoned staff member as well. So just to let you know what
I hear what you're saying, but I served on the budget committee for 4 years, took a year off. Well, I've been involved in town politics since you were superintendent. And every year, I've seen $500,000 or more go back to the taxpayers. So.
And often those are positions that we haven't been able to fill.
Or just unexpended revenues.
Or unexpended revenues.
$500,000, is a lot of money. It's basically a dollar on a tax rate. But in the school's budget, it's, 5% would be, it's 6%?
It's not even quite that. Or is it close? I'll look at it. But yeah.
But it's that range. It's not a significant number, but it's not like it's 20%. No, take that back, it's 3%, 3%.
Good way to look at what I'm talking about is look at what was in fund balance prior to releasing the encumbered funds. And
Understood.
there's a significant difference between the two.
And I had positions we couldn't fill, which was a good chunk of, not all of,
But that's every year.
yes.
So that's kind of where I'm going with it, and
Understood.
you know, you've said at budget committee meetings, we can't spend down to $0 in a school budget.
We can't.
Okay. So that's where, that number there, what that safety zone is.
So why can't we spend to zero?
Well, because I don't have the option of saying, oops. And so if we're getting close or we're starting to get, I mean, personnel isn't somewhere, once there's a contract, that I can turn around and say, well, we're not going to pay you here.
Right.
So we will start holding off on some other things to make sure that we're good. It doesn't mean that we put in extra here and extra there to make sure. I have never been given a contingency line up to this point. We've always just kind of put the brakes on.
And you may not. You know, that's up to the
Understood.
board. I'm
Understood, yeah.
just throwing out my,
But we've kind of put the brakes on and said, okay, we need to be looking at it. When we went into March, it was certainly, okay, now we really need to be looking to see where we are and what we have, and
Yeah.
things changed.
I mean, I'll agree with Tim, we need to really start from a very bare budget. And then say, okay, what are our educational and facility goals on top of that, and see what we can add to it that makes sense, that we can convince the taxpayers that we're going to be successful at, and they should fund it. You know, we've got, you know, this, when we came in, there was a lot of facilities upgrade that had been considered. Some of that the board didn't continue with. Some of those exist. A lot of those needs still exist. And then we have our limited occupancy right now due to COVID that, you know, adds to some of the things that we've got to deal with, that takes our time to focus on some of that other stuff away in the short term.
Yep.
You know, we see that on our agenda here, on a couple other things in our next section, things that we're dealing with on a facilities basis. But I mean, those are still real needs, and I think some of the requirements of those are actually going to change based upon the pandemic. I think we're going to see heating and ventilation take on a whole new layer as far as disinfectant in stream, whether it's UV or something else, that when we move forward, I think we need to have part of the answer, because it wasn't in the previous plan, because it was an unknown need.
Right.
And now it is, because, and I don't even think that industry has the answers yet. It's going to be what the system's going to look like next year versus what they looked like last year are going to be substantially different. It could be substantially different. Because even if this is a short-term problem, the long-term health concerns are going to be there, because something like this could come back.
Right.
Or be different, where it's the level of, similar but different. So I think that's something we need to certainly address when we go back out to addressing those repairs and upgrades. Getting back to, so I guess on the budget priorities, Joel and Josh, you got any initial thoughts or discussion on that?
I don't have any initial thoughts. I mean, I'd just like to see, is it our plan, Mr. Chair, to, I know we mentioned a workshop. Are we talking about a workshop first, or where are we going with that?
I don't know the process you guys typically do here. You wait for a base budget presented by the superintendent, or you guys, how far deep you guys normally go before the board weighs in into it. I mean, in some ways, the board can't start from zero because we don't know what the needs are. So in some ways, we need to be presented with, say, a bare minimum level, and then work from there. So I don't know typically how you've done that in the past.
Well,
I'm sorry, you're talking to me or Ruth Ellen?
I'm talking to you, Joel.
Oh, sorry.
I mean, you were chair for quite a few years, so I'm just gonna pick your brain.
Yeah,
how
no,
typically you've
I mean,
done
the
it.
last few years, we've started off with sort of a, I'd call it a workshop, and it was, it was pretty informal. It was, I don't know if I should call it informal, but it was just some preliminary conversations about needs, so that we could sort of see what are some of the needs they're saying that they really need to move the district forward. Gives us sort of an idea initially of what we're looking at in sort of a district-wide sense, because we would hear from the different department heads and stuff. But we don't have to go that way. That's how we've initiated the process in the past few years.
Right. I think Tim brings up a good point of saying, if we started with these are the base operating costs to continue with the current staff, the current items at a status quo, then we have the other improvements that we're doing, whether it's an educational improvement, or it's a facility improvement, or it's a repair, those going on top of it. So I don't know how it's been separated out. I know sometimes the budget for department is kind of encompasses all that, where you have, okay, in this area, we've got an upgrade, we've got a repair, we've got an improvement.
typically, we
In
do
the budget.
some of both of those. We do start more or less at that zero-based mentality. It's not just, we had it last year, therefore it's going to get rolled in again this year. We look at every line. And then go back to see, is this something we need? Is this something we can change? Is this something that we've made an improvement, therefore we can reduce this line, but now there's a need here and we need to increase that. So the last couple of years, we've done kind of as Joel said, an informal discussion at the outset to get a sense of what are the board, here's what we're seeing, what is the board looking to give us as far as direction, as far as we want it kept here, we want to see your focus here, and then build a budget, we come back and we give an overview informally again to answer questions, to kind of get a sense of, is there anything else before we do the formal presentation for the public, anything else that you need to see as backup documentation, other pieces that you'd like to see as part of the binder? And then the first part of November, roll into the formal, here's where things are.
And these were posted as well, and
Yes.
public certainly could come and listen to it. It was just, just sort of preliminary. It also sort of helped, I think, the admin team and district admin to sort of understand how is the board looking at approaching the budget this year. I mean, there are some years where certain board members said, I'm not supporting any new positions,
Yep.
period, so that sort of, that blanket
changes where we
statement
go.
right off the get-go can sort of shape where you go with things.
Thinking about it, I would say for me, if we were presented first with, this is the cost to continue on the same path we have with staff, facilities, not with any repairs, upgrades, just strict operating costs.
When you, not any repairs, so just
Well,
maintenance, but nothing new.
Yeah, if we have a bus line, or we have a $10,000 maintenance line, that needs to stay. So these are our base operating costs currently with what we have for staff, what we have for programs. You got heat, lights, power, labor, and then on a separate list, these are the areas that we have upgrades, improvements, or significant repairs that are not in a budget line item, like a furnace or an AC for a school. So, because this is the base, and then I think the board needs to kind of be in consensus with that base budget. And say, okay, that we say, we agree, this is the base operating cost. I mean, that deals into staffing and other things. Is everyone in consensus with that? And then saying, okay, based upon what that number is and where we feel we can want to be, what are the priorities here? You know, as far as educational versus facilities versus whatever it is, and say, okay, because we're not going to be able to have everything. So what our base cost budget is, then we will hopefully be able to quickly determine where we're going to feel comfortable, how much we can put back on top of that, that is justified, that we can get the support of the taxpayers.
Okay.
So just to clarify.
And I'm not married to any particular way. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Joe.
Go ahead, Joel.
I was just going to say, I'm certainly not married to any particular approach to this. We have some new board members that have watched the budget process through other lenses. And maybe it is time to sort of change up the way that we approach it. I mean, certainly last year didn't work for us. So I'm very open to other suggestions and ways of doing it.
Tim?
My comment was going to be, and as we're mapping out this budget, and you said our bare bones budget of kind of where we are now, and I agree with that. Staff now, what position are we in now? But the next step is, dollar-wise, what is going to be your recommended changes so we can see where we are now, we can see what you're recommending to change, so that we can look at your projected changes as a board and say, no, we really want to keep that program in, or we agree with you that we want to take that out. That's going to adjust in our first kind of decision process of where that base budget ends up.
Yeah, I think that could be in that list of, these are the, from what Tim is saying is, okay, this is the baseline budget to operate as status quo. These are your recommended changes, plus or minus, based upon what you see as needs, either what we have extra, what we don't have enough of, and then we have to the sidebar, upgrades educationally, facility, transportation, and then saying, okay, then the board's got to get comfortable and agree on the base budget, resolve and agree or make changes to your suggestions, and then bring what we can, or we feel the taxpayers can afford, of all the things that a lot of them need to get done.
Right.
Some of them are on the wish list, and where that makes sense based upon where we are today.
And do those become separate warrant articles likely?
Right.
Once we get through the budget process and identify that pool of money we need, then I think as a board, we can say, how is the best way to present this to the taxpayers? But if we break it out into individual buckets for the board, then we're going to be able to kind of move things around and say, okay, this is the number we want. How do we get there? Do we do it as a flat operating budget warrant articles? Do we do it as a straight Fund 10? Because we know that's the number we have to get to.
I mean, there's some things that, us new board members aren't 100% up to speed on, like where all the expenditures are on that base budget. So this would be actually good for me, and hopefully some of the other new board members, to say, okay, this is what you're saying is our base operating cost, and I need to understand that and accept it, or say, and it's also an opportunity to say, can we do this part better from a cost basis? Maybe we could come up with some positive changes to that. Maybe we can't, but it would be, I think it's worthwhile to attack it that way.
So as we look at then that piece, I'm looking at the budget development sheet going, okay, this is going to be a little different than we've done it before, which is fine, but wanting to make sure that I can give my administrative staff a good feel for, here's what I need from them when. Because we're also kind of winging it on some of a few other fronts right now. So I want to make sure that what you get doesn't get shortchanged in the process either. So if we're looking at final entries, roughly, in the past, we've done that budget workshop the end of October. You're looking at something prior to that, at least for the big pieces.
Yep.
Now, I may not have exactly all the pieces for, how many pounds of clay are we ordering for the art program, but if I can at least say, in the past, here's our 3-year average for this expenditure. Here's about what we're spending per kid for this piece, and then back up to say, all right, so that would extrapolate to roughly this, therefore, now we go from there. Does it make more sense for me to give figures to my budget heads to say, okay, so now this would be the allocation for art, rather than saying, what do you need, and give it back to me this way? I guess that's...
Well, the problem we're going to run into, and I'll give you an example, was a comment when we did one of our meetings I think we're at Valley View School, and the principal at the middle school made the comment about the technology in his building. And I think he was a little surprised when I said, we're a school, we need our technology to be up to speed. So your administrators should be bringing to us budgetary concerns of problems that they might think we're aware of, but we may not be aware of. Because I haven't been in Henry Wilson in years. And I think when I worked basketball games there, I don't think they had internet.
They just didn't give you the password.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So when would you like first large chunks? And I guess, are you looking for the whole thing, or are you looking for, are you looking for us to give you a facilities shell by this date and a technology shell by this date? Or are you looking at the whole thing all at once? Because again, I want to make sure that this makes sense for everybody. And I don't want to assume and then have you say that's not what we're looking for.
Well, if you had to have a complete shell,
Of everything? Mm-hmm.
yeah. I mean, today's the 28th.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 weeks is the 12th, 3 weeks is the 19th.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're the one that has to pull together. What do you think's a reasonable expectation that you could have it pulled together? Because to have it half pulled together, I think is not going to be, it's helpful to maybe get it incrementally, but as far as having a discussion on it, I think having a discussion on it is...
You want to see the how all
Right.
the pieces fit before
Right,
you...
because
Okay.
we can't, I mean, if we have a section, say the technology portion in a week and the facilities in 2 weeks, that's okay for information, people can start to absorb it, but when we get to the final picture of the entire shell, is the 19th to the 26th realistic? And the other thing is, maybe the answer isn't, you can give us tonight and you have to give us on the 5th. Looking at it, this is when I can get this information to you. I'm okay with that. I don't need an
Okay.
answer tonight
All right.
to pull that together. I mean, you could say, okay, this is what I need from your building
Yeah.
supervisors.
Okay.
And on the 5th, you could say, this is when I can have that shell of a base budget given to you and complete. I mean,
All right, I
we'll take
will-
pieces sooner, but
Right, okay. Then I will have that discussion. I'm thinking probably the 19th is going to be rushed, the 26th will be a better product. My next question is, are you looking, traditionally, we've done binders that have all of the different departments divided out, so you have a complete budget, but then you have department budgets within that. Are you wanting that divided, or are you wanting just give me the whole thing?
I'm okay with having it divided. I don't need a binder, say, as a paper copy. I mean,
Okay.
Just all, I mean, right now, we've been working from Google Docs, which I'm able to wade around in, so.
Okay. So if we put
Having
together,
it structured for those departments, but,
put together a binder, an electronic binder as opposed to the,
Right.
here's your notebook.
Or
Okay.
a folder somewhere, within our, we have the confidential drive, maybe a non-confidential drive that's budget.
Yeah.
But in the first instance, as we're getting this going, I'd rather look at like spreadsheets versus putting it into predictive budget software. So we can kind of see where it's going in the big buckets and say, okay, hey, this sounds good, this sounds good, this sounds good. Let's put it together.
Well, we can create the spreadsheets from the software, but
Okay.
if we wait and then try to do it on the back end of things, the data entry is a long process.
No, we want
Yeah.
to do, I think what Tim's
So-
point is,
But we can
well,
put-
he's okay with seeing the raw data.
Yeah.
You don't need to formalize it, so whatever that format it's in,
Okay.
that may be acceptable to staff.
But I can pull it, and you remember what you've seen from the budget committee for those binders. I mean, I can do,
Yeah, I don't need that to get through the beginning. I think
Okay.
when we come to the end and this board kind of says, hey, this is our budget, then we generate the binders for the budget committee at
okay.
that point.
So you're not necessarily looking at the line item detail right now as much as you are, give me where each large section for each department falls.
And how we're going to pay for it, and
But isn't that also just built off the line items that are going to
It
change?
is.
So
So
really,
that's
you
what I'm
might as well
trying-
just have all that.
Right.
You're just going to have all that, and you're
Right.
just going to break it down into sections. This is technology, this is facilities, and these are the base operating costs.
I can give it to you by the larger operating code. So I can give you an 1100 rather than the 20 pages that is 1100, that sort of thing.
And at some point, we might have to get into the
Of course.
20 pages, but I kind of want to know where it stands, because
Yep.
right now, we're up against two obstacles going into the budget without appropriating an additional penny. One is, we've got to fund the teacher's contract that the taxpayers just passed, and we have an increase in group.
In a
With
retirement.
retirement.
Yep.
Plus the usual healthcare increases on insurance.
Right.
Whatever else comes down.
I think the town said theirs is going up 6% on health insurance. Our rate's probably gonna be similar.
We find out ours usually around the
It's,
11th of November or so, sometimes a little bit sooner,
yeah, no later than that.
no later than. So you'll have it before you have
for
to
the health
finalize it, but the health
Right,
insurance
but
is a,
that's been the usual increase in healthcare, 5 to 6% on
I've
average.
seen them vary.
actually ours has gone down for a couple of years. Last year, we did have a small increase. So we're probably due for an up,
Yeah.
although I'd
Well,
rather
they're all
say we
in
went
the
down.
pool, so it's
Right.
whatever, however the whole state does. I mean, we could be doing horrible, the rest of the state could be doing
Right.
great, and we make out okay.
But
So
I always plan healthcare as twice inflation.
So
that's safe.
Let's say,
the DRA, just to kind of get a picture of where we are on the tax flow charts, on the big picture, DRA form we did today was the amended budget with the passing of the teacher's contract.
correct.
Is it the MS-25 or the MS-27 that comes down?
22 is, that comes next?
Yeah.
The MS-25 is the one that we do to close out the year. The MS-27 is the budget that goes into...
Next year.
Into next year,
So on
yes.
the MS-25, has that been done?
It's,
It
it's
is-
due October 1st, it will be done October 1st.
Okay.
It's 95% done right now.
So what we did today, so basically...
That's the amended
That's
budget,
actually
so we can
unrelated to the
put it up.
25, that's just an amended budget, because we had to submit everything from the late.
But by
election.
October 1st, we'll be able to pretty much calculate
What we'll
on our
have
tax
returning.
rate, where our tax rate is going to be December.
Correct.
Have you seen any changes in our estimates towards what the software is generating? I mean, the ballpark was, with funding the teacher's contracts, about 45 cents per thousand. Are we still in that area, or is that?
Well, since you had voted to return those monies from the 2.5% set aside, that will completely offset there.
It will, but and then with the monies that are left
It will drop,
in return, I think it's about 45 cents per thousand.
it might,
But I
might
don't know
even go
how
a
much
little
that's
higher than
changed
that.
when encumbered funds have gone in and gone out.
it may go a little higher than that.
Okay.
Yeah, we only have one section left on the MS-25, but it's pretty spot on.
And that's a pretty dynamic fall in the budget, because it's not just a 45 to 50 cents decrease, it's a 45 to 50 cents decrease when we predicted an 85 cent increase.
Right.
So it's actually the 85 cents plus the 55 is what our projected tax rate
Right.
has gone down. So that's pretty significant. But I'll be looking forward to that report in a couple days.
Okay, moving on to, next thing on that section was budget calculations. Wasn't sure what you meant by this.
Well, the priorities you had looked at in general in those buckets, and then you had talked about some calculations where you had said, well, you know, whether it's a 3% increase or it's a flat, or it's, so I was looking to see if you were looking to break those out, if you were going to say, we don't want to see more than this % increase here,
Well, I think.
and how you wanted it presented.
I think the prior discussion kind of answered some of that.
I think it did.
So I think once we build on that base, well, first we got to agree on the base, and then build on that to where we feel that we can, you know, get funding to the taxpayer.
Okay.
Are you figuring the warrant article, any warrant articles into that? Like, we have one union up this year.
Well,
You know,
that would be.
I know it's not included in, but I mean,
Right.
when you figure your calculations, is that above and beyond what you,
No, I think.
I mean, it's not gonna be a big contra, it's not gonna be a
But
big.
either way, that's going to go before the voters.
Right.
Yes.
So that's going to be a warrant article.
Yes.
I think some of the other things, like Tim was saying, I use the example, like say if we need a bus. We're going to put that on a warrant, we're going to put it in the operating budget. Where does that make sense?
Well, and actually, we've put, with the bus, that one may be easy, because we've put enough into the,
Right. But we have
trust fund,
to make
assuming
that
that-
decision.
Right.
Because you could go forward and say, well, we think that'll pass, you know, you could put some other costs in the budget and say, we're going to bring that to the taxpayer and get them to vote on that, versus the other way with what those are. I mean, there's
Some things
there's reasons to do it both ways. I mean, I was on the prior boards, they just, what they chose to put on warrants were for whatever reasons. And I don't really didn't pay attention to why, you know, because just like the town, some things we would put in the operating budget, other things we would go to the taxpayer and ask permission. Sometimes they're for totally different reasons.
right.
It could be the board is split on it, or it could be they feel it's up to them to decide, or they feel for some other reason. Tim?
Brian, to answer one of your questions, one of the things that I'm going to suggest at the board level is we look at how we do our emergency funding. We did not withhold out of fund balance this year. The RSA that allows us to hold that, I think it's 2.5%
It's
back.
actually increased now.
Well,
It's
it's
gone up
increased,
to
but you have
five.
to have a ballot.
You have to have
Yes,
a ballot vote
Right.
to increase it.
But I'd almost like to put that in a capital reserve, because we have more control over our own money versus withholding it every year, having it roll over, and not knowing whether you'd ever be able to spend that money.
Yeah, because the reasons that allow, there's a lot of restrictions on what you can spend it on.
Right.
And if you fund it a different way, one time, and it just stays there, and it's a reasonable number similar to that, if we had something that's an emergency that doesn't meet the current requirements, we could address it.
Correct.
Where if you go with the way, their guidelines, it's very restrictive.
It is very restrictive.
It's a nightmare. I've never liked that RSA. We may not, you know, my suggestion may not be a one-time funding. It may be $50,000 a year for the next 3 years out of fund balance, so the taxpayer doesn't necessarily feel that hit. And some of our maintenance items, I know last year we were pretty close to 200,000. We were just under it. Most of those were funded out of fund balance. So again, depending on what the vision is that in the town, hopefully the federal government will come out and say, hey, Farmington Town Hall, here's $500,000, and we're not looking at that shell shock in the big picture with the taxpayers. But I don't see that happening. So, you know,
I was hoping maybe you had a crystal ball.
I think this is going to be a conservative budget, but we have to, and I think the way to do that is we have to improve our education, we have to make investments, and we have to ask the taxpayer the permission to do that. So that's kind of the picture I want to see from the experts.
And you've mentioned the strategic design process, and I think it's going to be very, very important. But one of the things we need to look at is the fact that right now we have it set for November 12th, 13th, and 14th, which is going to be fairly late in our budget process, because we would need to get this to the budget committee by the 20th.
Right,
So-
but even undertaking that process, really, we're just incurring the small cost to do the design analysis.
It'll give us the design that will definitely inform moving forward.
Right.
But we may not have everything back from that gathering on the 12th, 13th, and 14th to say it's going to drive this year's budget.
But I don't.
But if it's a 3-year implementation,
Correct. It
Then-
will definitely,
a lot of those costs aren't going to come in the first year, because a lot of it, from just my basic understanding of it, is that a lot of that, if you decide to go that way, a lot of it is getting everybody swimming upstream together.
correct.
And the implementation,
Comes in the next year.
next 2 and
Yes.
3 years, which is where you'll be spending more taxpayers' dollars.
Or
for that.
reallocating
Reallocate.
priorities.
Yeah.
It may be a better way to put it.
I think more or less where I was going with that is, I don't expect in this budget to define the strategic plan. One of the most brilliant things I've heard Misty say is, we want to allow and bring the community together and let them identify what we want to do with our educational system. That's the big goal of the strategic plan. So as we look at this year's budgeting, as we're looking to improve those small pieces before we're going to a strategic design, let's make that process part of what we need to do from today forward.
Absolutely.
Because we haven't done a good job doing that.
No question there. But I just wanted to make sure that people understood that those 3 days aren't going to,
Right. I
we
know
won't have
that.
all of that. No, I know, but not everybody has had the whole
Yeah.
explanation, so.
The other thing that I'd like to see this year too is a true tax impact on what our budget is going to do. I heard it over and over last year. I understand why prior school boards have done it, but realistically, what the taxpayer wants to hear is my taxes are going up or down 5 cents per thousand, or whatever that number is. And I think as we get into that, and just a quick note at the end, I think this board has to take a consensus of how we want to define that tax effect on our budgets.
Well, I think we can do it. But there's a lot of, right down to the wire, that number may change. We could say 5 and it could be 6.5.
DRA's going to make you put the word estimated in there.
Oh, yeah.
It's part of the language.
Yeah.
But-
If you insist on the language, it must say estimated.
Right, but, some people will say, they told me it was going up 12 cents and went up 17, or something to that effect. We need to do as good a job as we can in projecting that, so the taxpayers know what to expect. Anything else on the budget items?
I went through our strategic planning process
Yeah.
last year, did a 5-year strategic plan, and it was actually really powerful to kind of see. It really connected, the people, the taxpayers, with the school district as far as seeing what their priorities were, because we found a few things that we didn't realize. One thing was, they really wanted a good tennis court at the high school. That kind of built a little bit on athletics, but they also wanted to put a lot of emphasis on music. We didn't really understand how much it was until we got through the strategic process, and then we're able to, by the strategic process, now we can match up our budget each year to say, all right, this is what we need to do to reach that goal. This is how much we need to put aside, or maybe we're emphasizing something that we shouldn't be emphasizing because the taxpayers really aren't too keen on it. And it's probably not academic, it's probably something else. But it was a very, very enlightening thing, and I think you'll really be interested in what comes out at the end, because I found it to be pretty enlightening, and just the groups that you're in with people that are not in your circle,
Yeah.
you get to find out what their thought process is, and a lot of times they get enlightened into what's going on too, which I always found to be pretty cool, pretty interesting.
And they're adopted a 5-year implementation process?
It's a 5-year strategic plan, but I mean, our biggest issue was actually foreign language, having to build up a bigger foreign language program. It was a huge part of the district that they wanted. They not only wanted French, they wanted Spanish, and they wanted Mandarin. So we're building that in over a course of time. But the issue was, we didn't have the space because we had too small of a school, and we also needed more demand. So we had to, it's kind of if you want to, we need more kids in the program in order to make it worthwhile to fund it. So that was just an example. But.
Okay, moving along into old business. We have a driver's ed RFP. I read it and I had a couple suggested edits.
Okay.
First one was, you're looking for a 3-year contract?
That's what we have done in the past. Doesn't have to be.
I would
but
like to put it out as up to,
Up to? Okay.
because you may have somebody who may
Isn't
only want
looking
to
to do
try
that.
it for a year.
Yep.
And the way it was listed was, you've got to sign up for 3 years, but we can cut you loose in 30 days.
Right, okay.
So
Do you remember where that was, Charlie?
I think it was right at the top.
Okay.
And also
Yep,
at
I
the
see it.
bottom, it required that the applicant list 3 other school districts for references.
Okay.
I think it should be up to 3, or list other professional references, because what if they've never worked for a school district or with a school district?
Right.
So, I'd, just like those to be reworded to
Sure.
up to 3, whether you have school or,
I'd be okay with talking to 3 students or 3 parents, too.
yeah, I mean, ideally, we want references that are similar to our need, but if they don't have any, we still need references, because this may be first time that they would consider doing it, and
Right.
those are more likely candidates than people who have worked for 3 school districts, or would sign up for a 3-year contract, because I think may have to coax somebody into the field. Somebody may say, I want to add this to my business. I'm already doing
Right.
it now privately, but I want to consider this. And the way this reads, they wouldn't entertain that because it's a 3-year contract. They may say, well, what if I don't like it? So that's why I think it should be up to 3 years and to list.
And up to 3 professional references?
Yeah. That was about the only changes I saw.
Okay.
Anyone with anything else on that? Josh or Joel?
No, fine. Good.
Tim? Anything with that?
I'm good.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm okay with making those changes and posting it.
Date's okay?
I don't remember what the date was.
It's right around.
Bids received by Monday, the 2nd of November. I was looking at bid award either the 9th or 16th, depending upon
Yeah.
where we were in the weeds of the budget process.
No, I was okay with that. I saw that there
Okay,
was a couple
and then
days
to
on the award.
begin after the new year, because we would need to be able to advertise a class starting.
Yeah, no, that sounds good.
Okay,
Also, Ruth Ellen, on that last page, I noticed I made a typo under 3 years, the 3 different boxes we have there.
oh, yep,
First one has the wrong date. I think it said December
yeah,
1st.
Jan, okay, got it.
I can't get into it here, so.
Next on the agenda, we have custodial temporary position. And I see
So the
Larry
temporary,
is still hiding in the wings.
so, let me see here, where did I put that? I had included in the folder. and this was-
position we're talking about?
Could be.
This was a today's edition, and where did I put that?
Save $5,000 a year.
Now. Let me go back and take a look here.
This is doing it to me.
So you talked about what you were looking for. I had a conversation with Larry and Nancy Lapine, who is the custodial union president, and just looked at all of the pieces that you had given. So I just kind of wanted to include what our discussion had been. We did offer existing custodial employees the voluntary
Yep.
overtime first. Right now, we have about 25 of those hours that are taken, I guess. Covered, yes. And then looking at where things fell in accordance with the existing custodial agreement to make sure that we weren't going to be going afoul of the CBA. The current CBA does cover part-time positions in Article 1.1.1, so just an agreement that yes, they would be, that they wouldn't exceed 29 hours. And the concern was that if there was no paid time off at all, that somebody might show up sick, and that's kind of the big issue that is a concern right now. So I was looking at,
I saw that line and I wasn't really sure what it meant.
yeah, so looking at 2 hours accrued upon hire, and which isn't much, but then the remaining 28 hours would be accrued 1 hour per 40 hours worked, which isn't a great deal of time, but it does give at least some if an appointment had to be had or something.
This is for the part-time position.
This is for the part-time position.
So in this, you're recommending this time benefit.
That this would be the only benefit that would be attached to that position.
Okay. I guess my question is going through it. I didn't have, I really was fine with it. I guess the question came into the hourly rates. And then this spills over to the other form that you had for short-term costs. So you're proposing, so say if we had, if we were hiring for a position, and a full-time position, and it was 0 to 3 years, what would be our current pay scale for that?
It's
$13.51.
Okay. And if we went to the highest one, the 12 to 15 years,
it's 19 and change.
so these positions, we'd only be offering uh, 11% increase over a full-time wage.
No, when I calculate out, if I understood the line right, the wages and the medical benefits, I calculate that out to an hourly rate of $27.47,
But
which I
that-
think is high.
Well, I guess my question is, so we're offering for the part-time position, temporary, say I'm going to use 11% on the 0 to 3 years. So then when I go to the projected custodial cost form, for part-time help, 58 hours a week,
I calculated based on the 23.
23 what?
$23 an hour. I calculated at the top there.
Where was the 23?
23 is at 16 years plus?
So when you, yeah, but the number doesn't work out to that. Well, because the number works out to what Tim said, which is $27 an hour.
$27.47.
So I
And
kind
how
of,
I got there is I took the,
I included FICA.
okay, Medicaid, Medicare. So if you use 23,
You know what? I included retirement, which I shouldn't have. So I'll
Right,
back
'cause
off
you
on
gotta add-
that. Yep,
it's just 7.5%.
yep. So it's just the 7.65.
That'd be
yep.
24.661.
You're right.
And I mean, so in that estimate, you're using the highest possible cost.
Yes.
I guess my other question to Larry is, if we find a prime candidate that wants to work full-time, is that a benefit to you or not a benefit to you? Are you better off with the part-timers here and there, or are you better off with one full-time person if you get a quality worker?
In the long run, better off with a full-time.
But if we don't have a long-term need, we shouldn't be hiring a long-term person.
And we did just fill the one
Good.
open long-term position. It starts tomorrow night.
Good.
The only other thing I want, if I can speak to.
Go ahead, please do.
I know we had talked about with APC, the temporary custodial
Okay.
replacement position. We were supposed to have some quotes tonight, but last week they got really busy. He said he could give me the quotes on just if we brought in a part-time people. But you had asked for a tiered position too, so they're working on that.
Yeah, I mean.
And I wanted them to have both things done rather than piecemeal one and then have to come back later and say,
Okay.
but this is if they tiered it and they only brought them in so many hours at a time.
Yeah, I mean, because depending on the options, I mean, you may say, because they may be the highest cost option, so between the first wave of offering our current full-time employees overtime, and then adding part-time, and then supplementing with contract. I mean, because those are the three
Right.
options. I mean, you could add another full-time person, but I wouldn't want to add it unless we think there's going to be a long-term need.
But in looking at that, and I don't know your current staff, Larry, do we have somebody that's worked for the district for a long period of time that's going to leave in a year or so? Or is everybody here for?
The foreseeable future?
Yeah.
I don't know of anybody leaving
Okay.
right away.
All right, then that answers my question there. I mean, I think we just have to nail down an hourly wage for a part-time employee.
See, I would, when I looked at this hourly chart, we're looking for part-time people, and I would be more inclined to compress the top of the scale and say, bring the bottom up, and hold the top. So to say, I mean, because you may find somebody just change the scales and start higher and leave it at the number. Because if you're only offering a 11% incentive, part-time versus full-time, our benefits package is worth way more than that. So we'd still be saving quite a bit. And, say if we started a wage at $16.50 and kept it $23 an hour at the top, I mean, I don't think we're going to find.
But, and I was also looking at this, I know you say we would save, but right now we have hired all of the positions. So it's not like I don't have,
Hired.
we've hired all the
spent
full-time
that much.
positions.
Right,
So I
I'm
don't.
talking in part-time.
No, I know, but when you say we'd be saving on insurance, I don't have insurance budgeted anywhere. So I'm looking
Right.
at, okay, based on where I am, what else can we do
But
here?
if we were to say, okay, we're going to hire another full-time person and pay them 3 years, with 3 years experience, 15, the difference is that hourly wage of $13.50 or 51, and you add in our current benefits package, it's way more than 50.
Right, but we
So-
also we don't have another full-time
Right.
position in there right now.
So my point is, it's a temporary position. If we compare the cost per hour of our full-time people versus this temporary need, I think we could incentivize this on the bottom to potentially get more people. So that's just one thought. Because if we had a temporary starting wage of $16.50 with the top of being 23, or I'm okay with even being 22, the top wage for part-time.
So you're looking at 1650 to 22?
I'm just putting some numbers out there. I'm
I know.
not hard and fast on it, but I think we need to be a little bit more incentivized on the bottom. And then, so I guess that explains on the other number, which didn't make sense, was on your cost.
Because I had included the retirement, which I need to
Retirement
take out.
and,
Yep.
I mean, I don't know what the rest of the board thinks on the wages, but.
I don't like to leave it in the middle and keep it at $20 an hour. $20 an hour is a decent wage for somebody that wants to make extra money, particularly if we have 4 to 12 hours or something similar to that available. You know, somebody that might work weekends, have a couple days off, that wants to go out and make some extra money. That's decent money for the hard work they're going to do, because the job isn't going to be an easy job.
Right.
You know, you gave a range.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that range, but I'd say, your target should be, hey, $20 an hour. And if we get, the best custodian you ever had, then we get the option to go back into our federal money and say, hey, does this guy, do we want to keep another 3 months? And does he get another 50 cents? Does he get $1? Whatever. But I'd like to target that number at the $20 an hour.
Yeah, but if you do that a mean, say you go 16.50 to 22. You average that out, we're gonna be spending about $20 an hour.
Yeah.
Because it's not like we're gonna get people of 12 to 15 years experience applying for this position. We're gonna get a little bit of everything. So I think you'd be in that $20 an hour cost.
Yeah, so
I'll
I
make
mean-
that motion to amend it to 16.50 to a high of 22.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? Not hearing any, all in favor?
All right.
No,
Joel, do you have any other thoughts you want us to consider on it?
no,
Okay.
I don't want, no. I'd rather, no, I'm not gonna comment, I'm just gonna vote no.
Okay.
Okay.
So is there anything else on that proposal?
Yeah, my question is, who reaches out to whom within the administration that's interested in the position? They get a hold of you, or they get a hold of Larry? Okay.
It's posted.
And the
It's
best
posted.
way to get a hold of you is email, call the district?
It's email. Most of the postings have my email and my phone number.
Okay. But with your workload right now,
I have my
email is
Email
is better
just as well.
versus, okay.
It's either because the number I use is a cell phone that I have all the time, so it's.
Okay.
And to answer, this kind of jumps ahead a little bit, but it also answers one of the questions that you brought up around retirement. It's at that 35 hours consistently, and if it were to be through the end of the school year, the retirement system considers that consistently. So if we were to have a para or someone who's on the support staff pick up additional hours, if it takes them to 35, we would be paying the retirement there. Consistently.
And then determining that from here to the end of the year?
If it's consistent between now and the end of the year, we would owe retirement for this year.
Where did that come from? And the reason I'm asking is I'd like it from Retirement's Legal, because I worked a number of years and many weeks worked over 40 hours as a part-time temporary police officer when I was running my own business. So the definition that I've seen over and over and over again from the retirement board is it a permanent position? And how do you define a temporary position? And with me, it was, I could work a 60-hour work week because it was a small community, and you don't know what's going to happen, provided the 60 hours is a crisis-type mode. We're in a crisis here that, when this is over and we don't have to clean as diligently as we're cleaning, they're gone. So, I think it does meet that definition from the retirement perspective, and if we get pushback, then, we need to go up to the trustees up there and say, hey, look, this ain't working for us. You need to change your rules. We're being very cautious by honoring contracts. We're not trying to put full-time people in and rob the system of money. These people are going to be gone in 90 days. And when posting these positions, we need to post them at 90-day intervals.
Well, remember that it was you know, you had said initially that the bonus would be in 90 days, and rather than try to figure which day is a day, we put it in by number of hours.
I
but-
think, and we haven't seen the spreadsheet yet, but we're in a position right now where we've got to go 90 days, and I'm not saying we don't need it for the rest of the year, but when we look at our funding and we look at our COVID funding, you've got to be pretty close to expending that emergency budget. And if we're going to hire a janitor for our custodian for more than 90 days, then we got to start looking at, and I've seen some notes here, but look at other line items that we're going to pull that money from. Unless the governor commits to releasing more COVID money to us, because we've already expended our money, which I've seen a lot of districts already tap him up for the money they lost with FEMA. Or the federal government comes through with a bill and says, here's another way of funding your critical changes in your budget process during COVID-19. So I think, do we need something beyond the 90 days? Yeah. Are we ready to budget that today? I don't think we are.
Well, and that's why what I gave you at
Right.
those maximums, we can cover from those positions that were not filled this year and are not intended to be filled this year.
Okay.
So that does give us some latitude if those other funding streams are not available to us, because I didn't want to jump out and say, we're going to hire somebody and I'm sorry, we're going to let you go because I can't pay you.
So I'm going to make a motion to approve the, policy for the temporary janitorial help as amended,
Second.
which is with the hourly changes, and I think that was the only one.
Do you want to put the 90-day temporary in there now so it's clear cut if anybody ever, from the retirement ever comes down?
I'm okay with adding at this point, it's a minimum 90 days.
Minimum
I
of 90 days
would make
or
maximum.
maximum, because if it's a maximum, then your hiring bonus, we may need to shift.
I'm okay with a maximum. Josh, you accept that friendly amendment?
Yes, sir.
Any discussion on the motion? Not hearing any, all in favor?
Aye.
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 So I want to go to the cost sheet that Ruth Ellen prepared here. And if we put in, I got a couple questions for Larry. I think I started off with the first one, but, so on the part-time help, 58 hours a week, I didn't use.
That would be two
FICA.
positions.
2 positions,
58
total hours.
total hours.
Total
but
hours.
still, you have 58 times, actually just use 22 times 1.075, if that's what we use for FICA and Medicaid. I don't know if that covers workman's comp. I don't know what workman's comp would be in that position. You, Larry? Probably don't know.
Let's go back and look.
Yeah.
I'll look it up quick.
But say you're gonna be, who knows, you could be 50 cents. You're gonna be $24 an hour instead of 27. So say you're $24 times 58 times 33. You're gonna be more like, no, that doesn't make sense.
8.17 for workers' comp.
So that's 8.17%.
8.17%. Which is going to be a little less than what I'd put in for retirement at 11.8, so it's going to be about 3% off.
So that number comes out to be, so it's a saving, yeah, so for 48, approximately 48,000. I mean, you gotta figure it in exactly, but, so it's a little bit less, it's, say $4,000 less than that line item. But I had one question, Larry, on the gloves. $300, say if we've got 10 staff people, we got more than that. So I guess, what are we buying for gloves, and do you know what the cost per box is?
Yeah, $27 per box, which
Box
has
is 100.
50 in a box. Well, it has
50
100.
cents.
Yeah, it has 50 sets, 100 individual ones.
And
in
what
a
are we
box.
buying for gloves? Nitrile would,
Nitro,
yeah,
non-latex,
yeah.
non-powdered.
And what are we buying for mill? 3 or, what is it,
It's,
4 or 5?
no, I think it's 6 mil.
I'll look. Is what I was supplying, I was buying like less than 20. I was just curious.
Well-
Because depending on your number, you're figuring, depending on that, you're figuring like 10 sets a day per employee? Is that what number this would come down to? Per day?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it comes down to about 500 pair per week, what you were looking at.
Yeah, because I'm not only buying them for my staff.
Okay,
This is for
This is for
nurses and
nurses.
everybody.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's for the district.
yeah, I was just checking, I was running some numbers and I went, it seems a little high, but depending on your
Well,
cost and how many you
is-
feed.
Gloves are an item that are difficult to get.
Yes,
to.
they are.
Yes, they are.
And we get a little thick.
$20 yesterday.
Yeah, well, you're doing better than, I was chasing some the other day. I wasn't, but. Where'd you get the 20 boxes?
I'll tell you off camera so that they don't sell out.
Yeah. Yeah, so if we go to this, so say you've got supplies total for 33 weeks, and 33 weeks gets us to when?
That's through the end of the school year.
Okay, so this is to the end of the school year. So it comes to 100 and say we're at 140 to 146, 5,000. Where are we gonna get this money?
Well, and this is where, right now, this would take us to roughly 66,000. As I added things up there, it's not quite $2,000 a week
Right,
times 33. So, granted, that's current usage and current prices, both
Yeah.
of which could change in a heartbeat. We
Yeah.
understand that.
it should get better.
Go
So,
up or down depending on,
Yeah.
like right now, Henry Wilson isn't using as much because they haven't been in.
right now, I have, for this type of materials, I've got about $74,000 set aside in the CARES Act. So I have enough to cover this, plus a buffer.
So
Now, go ahead.
is that 77,000 that you have encumbered, or 70,000 in the CARES Act, did that number change, or was that already encumbered in your vision of where that money's going in process?
I went back and looked at, based on this, did some shifting, and then put a buffer in, knowing that we may have some things that change as supply chains change. And that took pretty much, it encumbered, I think, all but $600. And I have to say, based on this price, it's this. So I could go back in and put in, 2 more chunks of gloves or something, but.
So with the federal appropriation that came in,
Right.
what, if anything, is left?
About, if I leave that 74,000 in for this,
Yep.
about $600,
Okay. So-
because that
so-
covers,
So we're in a position as we move forward, for instance, we're funding our janitor at 90 days, then we need to get an application into the governor's office to say, hey, we're gonna need another X amount of thousands of dollars to finish out what we need to do in our school year. Because everything that we have may not have been submitted for reimbursement, but we've encumbered it.
we've encumbered it, yep.
So I'd like to see next week a budget of what do we need to take us to the end of the year?
Okay.
And what do we need to ask the governor's office for additional money under the CARES Act? He says it's there.
Do you want that budget to come to you, or based on these figures, averaging it out on the 22, do you want me to submit it to the governor
No,
now?
I think you gotta come to us because there may be additional costs.
Okay.
And if we're gonna say, okay, does this make sense, because we're gonna go to the governor with it, I think it needs to come from a vote of the board saying, now, so what you're saying is the supply line alone is gonna max out what we've been funded for with everything else that we've allotted to the CARES Act.
Correct.
So the 78,000 for additional overtime commitments and part-time help is in excess of that.
Yes.
And there may be additional things that we may need if we're gonna go to, if we're gonna ask the question, we wanna make sure that if there's something that we can foresee, we're gonna wanna put that in there.
Right.
And I'd rather the 78,000 go towards the CARES Act request than our decision not to fill positions that, in all likelihood, we probably should be filling.
Well, those positions, the full-time position that's mentioned there, the first one, is now split. It's a part-time English, part-time ELO position. And that was a change that was done last year. That position was not filled. The other was an admin assistant. Those were two that were relatively earmarked toward that other admin position that we had lost but hadn't quite funded.
But that's in our current budget for this year?
That's in current budget for this year.
That was funded last year?
That was funded last year. The positions were changed this
Right,
year.
okay.
And that's where we were looking
So you're
to
saying
fund
that's a
that.
potential savings?
It's a potential savings, and so if I had to take it out of, I could. That's where we were looking to try to fund that other admin position, but hadn't reached it yet.
Yep. No, I think we should ask.
Certainly, I'm happy to ask.
And there may be some,
We may have other things that need to go
we
here.
need to make sure that they're solid, because when we submit it, if we say these are not just, we think we are, this is what we know we gotta do. And these are right down to the cost estimates, hours, commitments from staff. I mean, if we, and I guess this is a question for Larry, based upon what we see here, if we get to 25 hours of committed overtime from current staff and additional 58 hours a week, are we gonna be able to do what we need to do?
Does that need to be another 29 on top of that?
It's probably needs to be another 29 because we do have a person going out for an operation, so.
So that 58 hours needs to go, an
Go.
additional 29.
And then we need to calculate,
So that just went to 87. Okay.
well,
And that's kind of why I'm waiting to hear from that APAC,
Contract.
because if they could supply help, they cover workman's comp and everything through their,
But say they have a little bit higher rate.
I know that it's,
But,
that's,
so if we have, hopefully enough dollars associated with it, because you may have trouble filling that part-time hours, that you may have to then allot the money to the contract firm to backfill. And hopefully, well, it's always a goal, hopefully their efficiency will kind of offset some of that increased cost, but that would yet to be seen. It's going to be on a person-by-person basis, depending on who they bring in here.
right, in this service, the two gentlemen that came in, went through the school, looked, because they took all the information of square footage and everything, that they're coming up with what the cost will be for person two. They guaranteed that anybody that they would send here would be a trained custodial staff member, and they would try to get the same people here each time.
Yeah. I mean, we gotta have as many options as we can, because we gotta get the work done. So I think that's why we need the three levels. Even if we don't end up using the contract firm, because we may be able to get part-time help, but we need to have that in our arsenal.
let me ask a question budgetary.
Go ahead.
We have an employee who goes out on medical. Benefit-wise, potentially, if it's a long-term employee, can there be a big sick bank there? How is that sick bank funded? Is it funded out of the regular payroll line, or do we have a separate?
The way that the sick bank is established, it's so many days per the CBA that the board contributes and says, there's this many days for the sick bank for this group.
Let me simplify my question, because I don't think I was clear.
Okay.
If I'm a custodian, can I have sufficient sick time that I've earned that's going to pay for my 13-week absence, that I'm not going to have a savings in the budget when I'm out sick because I'm drawing on that line that funds me as a janitor? Because I don't think I've ever seen sick.
There is, of course, I don't have that binder with me. There is a small line. It's not going to be enough that's going to take a 13-week anything
Okay.
for anybody. Depending upon what someone has accrued for sick time. I mean, some people have a great deal of sick time accrued because they're not using it. Others don't have much year to year.
So I think, one of the things that, we're going to have to think about next week and in planning this is, if the employee puts in for medical leave, and let's assume it's 13 weeks.
Should be
Why-
4 to 6.
And it would be,
Yeah.
FMLA allows a 12-week leave.
Yep. But, and for a loyal employee, obviously, we're going to go longer than that, potentially if we have to go longer. But where I'm going with this is, if we have to bring somebody in for 6 weeks and we're paying, what's that budget number to get them up to where we're going to bring in somebody part-time to fill in for that person while they're out?
And that we won't know until we get their tiered structure. so
Right.
that we know that.
That and, where is the employee at now for a grade, because that's a number. We've spent all our CARES Act money. We've spent money from potentially 2 positions that weren't filled. So how are we going to pay to replace the person that's out sick for those 4 to 6 weeks? We'll have some money from his or her hourly wages,
But not
but
that
that's not
much.
going to bump up to where we're trying to get on a part-time basis, or it's not going to pay for our
There-
company to come in.
There is a substitute line as well.
Yes.
So
We do
that's,
have a custodial substitute line, which would be part of where this would draw from. But obviously, that's also not going to go 12
But-
weeks.
In essence, that person being out, if we have to fill that position, that we would have to fill that position regardless of the pandemic.
Correct.
Correct.
So them being out,
That hits our bottom line, not
it's our bottom
necessarily
line and not the amount that we could request.
Right.
So in this number, this 58-hour number, we may need to look at that.
Well, I
And
think-
maybe we need to make sure that we have satisfactory. Maybe that number needs to be higher because we have a higher need. But the person being out is going to be on us.
And that would end up falling under that
Yeah.
positions not
Because
filled.
we can't use that as justification for that additional CARES money because this is over and above. So I think that we should make sure, is this the bare minimum and in 58 hours? And we should make the request for what we feel we need and not a bare minimum? Because if we're going to make the request, then it should be 73 hours or whatever.
I looked at it
We may
in
not be
terms,
able to go back.
nope, and I looked at it in terms of what you had asked me is, if we're gonna do this, where do we pay for it from? And I was giving you what I knew I could pay for.
and that's good,
Yeah.
but we got
No,
another income.
understood. But you asked specifically, so where would it come from?
Yeah.
I told you where it would come from.
This is what we,
Like I said, I think we should look at the hours required for part-time help and make sure that we've got a comfortable number, might need to be a little bit higher, and then if we can get the additional funding, then we give us some wiggle room. If we don't, and we've got to find it from our own budget, we're gonna have to watch it. Because say if
Yeah.
the number was 73 hours, that's gonna put it, whatever number you pick, if 20% is gonna put us over that 90,129 that you've got on the other side.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
if I were to use my standing quoting factor, I'd go a 58 times what's going to be the difficulty factor, and I use a 1.25 number, that's 72 and a half hours. So that's what a 25% contingency on, that I've got the cost properly estimated. So putting an
And-
additional 25% gets us a 72 and a half, or whatever number you pick, because
Yeah, and rough numbers, adding in FICA and workers' comp, it's going to take it, if you use 22, it's going to take it to around 25, 15 hours. So,
right, just so the number's a little bit less, but if you use a 25%,
to bump up what you need, yeah.
25% for contingency, based upon what you don't know what you don't know, because we're not at full steam with this.
So
It
that
gets
could be-
you into 73 times, what did
your
you say the rate was? 25?
25.50, and if you up that by another 25%.
No, I'm
you're-
using the number times 33. I ended up with that part-time per week could be 61,000 versus 52. And you add that to your 26,
It would be
11, 13,
24.
you're 87, 121. So you're basically right at, just under that 90,000. And we don't know what else we're gonna run into.
Right.
So I think if we're gonna put in a request, we know we got the committed hours from staff. We use like a 72-hour for part-time help and make that part of the request to the government for additional funds. Unless there's any other things that we need to come up. I mean, we can do it at the next meeting, because there may be some additional stuff that you.
I'm not even opposed to, if we call it quick, if you come up with a number before Monday, I'm not opposed to a quick telephonic meeting to give you authorization, because what I'm seeing now happening.
I don't want to wait.
Yeah.
You what?
I don't want to wait.
Well,
Yeah.
and where I'm going with that is what I'm seeing is because of the crisis with the FEMA money, the process of people starting to go back to the governor has already started.
Right.
So we need to get on that list.
Well, I'm
per
okay,
se.
if that's a concern, I'm okay with going now at this amount, but unless you got some other things that come to mind.
So you're looking at, easy enough to do the math. You want us to up the hours per week. You're wanting us to look at.
I mean, we've dropped the
72.
rate to what we would expect, so we dropped it down on the cost, on the time, but that total number is probably gonna go up $9,000 in that part-time labor over 33 weeks, which is not a lot per week, but it's more. And
So if we're looking at 75 hours total?
75, 72,
Okay.
and then if we're gonna submit the request as soon as possible, I'm okay with it. But is there anything else you think that we need to ask for? We've got our barriers.
We've got
ordered the
barriers.
additionals. Is there
We may
anything-
need a few additionals, but I
What
think
about our cleaning units? Where are we at with our,
Foggers.
the
Foggers
the
are right.
sprayers.
the sprayers, and anything, other capital expenditures that you,
We have money already encumbered for 3 more that
Okay.
have been back ordered through one company. But those have been back ordered for a while, so.
that was the original company
That was
that you
it.
had?
So I
Nine.
have 3 sprayers for 3 at each school right now.
And the others would give us the latitude to designate one just for
Right.
buses and
Yep.
that sort of thing. So,
I'll make a motion to authorize the superintendent to request additional CARES Act funding from the governor for the 25 hours per week of overtime commitment of staff and 75 hours per week of part-time help at a maximum rate of $22 an hour plus benefits and required benefits which would be FICA, Medicare, Medicaid, and workers' comp, and the accrued sick time per the policy we adopted. Is there a second?
I'll second it for discussion.
Discussion.
When you said the $22 an hour, is there, because we're funding overtime, is there anybody on the roster that would hit over that mark? Just based on what you're...
Well, this is for the part-time help, is that where the overtime is already set by their wage?
Okay.
That
the
number
overtime's
has
set
got
by
to do with
theirs.
the part-time
Okay.
help per the
All
policy
right,
we
I'm
just
good
adopted.
with it. I'm
Yeah.
good with it.
Yeah.
And when I figured the overtime, I figured it on the top
Right.
rate.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it maybe gives us a little bit also cushion on hours if we have somebody that comes in at a lower rate, based upon experience.
I'm good.
Any other discussion on the motion? Not hearing any, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes. Next, retirement question we've
Answer.
talked about,
Talked
Yeah.
about that already.
answered. Okay. Next on the agenda was internet report, which was in there later today.
And so the question was, where were we on those lines? And in a nutshell, oops, let me see here. So we're looking at, the district internet line has 22,000 budgeted in it. As we were doing our budget process, we were looking at that higher amount. One, we were paying more for a lower amount of bandwidth. And we discovered in the process, after budget was well in process, that First Light had been overbilling us on a number of pieces. And we've spent several months going back and forth with First Light. Most of that has been corrected through a credit. Right now, the district internet is $900 a month. There is that second line that Tim, you had asked about. That's $285 a month. That will be ending in October. But right now, for us to cut it over, because they were in the process of changing out the phone lines, if we had cut that, it was going to cut our Siemens and security connections. So they're finishing out that cutover, and then that will end in October. And then the Atlantic broadband failover line is $311 a month. So our total costs right now for the year will be about $6,325 less than we have budgeted. So that could potentially go toward increasing bandwidth and/or increasing the backbone in order to be able to handle that additional bandwidth, because I think we're going to need to look at both to up where we are. But I don't know if that fully answers what you were asking. I know the question was about that second line.
It does and it doesn't. And what
Okay.
I'd like to do is, I'd like to look back, and I'll clear it up in my mind. There were
Okay.
there was a bid that went out for internet services. And there were two specifications. There was SAU and school district.
Yes.
So I'd like to see the tally sheet on the bid that we awarded and compare that to the budget.
Okay. I can get that for you.
So I have a question. What was First Light's reason / excuse why they were overbilling us?
Part of it related to when we moved to the SAU in Henry Wilson from 60 Charles Street. They were still charging us for lines at 60 Charles Street when we'd been here for a while. And as we went back and traced it, we said, no, these POTS lines, we're not even there. That building's been sold, we're not renting it, doesn't belong to us. And we've gone back and forth. They've not been easy to communicate with because not all parts of the system work together there. We did get that straightened out. There has been a credit that was put on the account, and as of the October billing, the only piece that we will still have with First Light will be the district internet, because the phones have been awarded to another company.
So what is our contract requirements that we signed with First Light? Annual contract, multi-year deal?
I believe it's a 3-year contract, but I will get
Okay,
it on the
well-
internet.
Yeah, it just concerns me when you said we had issues, and I want to make sure that we have quality vendors for our needs, and if they have been not 100% satisfactory, I want to make sure that we address it so they become, or we will replace them.
They have become more responsive, but it's been a process.
Okay. I will keep that in mind next time this comes up.
Okay.
Just going back to your comment on any surplus money in this line item, and how we're going to spend it. On the technology side, I think we have a significant capital reserve fund that if we had to spend $8,000 in repairs, I'd rather pull it from there, and it's just me talking, than the $6,000 until we get a good idea of where our COVID funding is gonna fall in place.
Understood. I wouldn't disagree with you there.
If there's $6,000 or $7,000 a year, it helps us pay for Larry's stuff, that's great. And at the same time, because we've got a fairly decent technology, we can resolve those problems as well.
I mean, and I think when we get into the budget stuff, because we know it's going to be a tight year, if we have some reserves available, we may want to consider those first, instead of going to the taxpayer when we don't absolutely have to. But that's just a point of discussion.
And we do know that we are going to need to continue to increase bandwidth. The gig for the district is very low. It's light years from where we were, but when we have multiple devices now that we are looking to be one-to-one, we're going to have to beef up that backbone in order to be able to maintain that.
Yep, I would agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't sat on a system here in the busy times, but if there's a problem in bandwidth and performance for people to do what they need to do, it needs to be addressed sooner than later. And I may put this back out for bid sooner than later. I don't know what that contract looks like.
Well, I'll get you a copy.
Give me a copy, because if all of a sudden a need goes from 1 to 2, and we don't have, well, we can look at it.
See, the other thing now that Brian's on board that I kind of like seeing, and I don't know what the numbers are today, but I know we're going through E-rate on some of our, Verizon and AT&T. I think at one time AT&T was a fixed cost, unlimited $40 a month for their box, and it was a different price with Verizon. I was paying under the GSA contract a fixed price per month with unlimited data on the Verizon account. So I think as we're trying to penny pinch when we're doing our pricing, I think that we should be looking at our GSA and our state contracts in addition to what we're going out to bid, or do we waive bid because this is a dynamic price that we're not getting from E-rate? I kind of like that balancing and searching for prices and get our, our best price. And with Verizon, if I remember the conversation correctly, we might have been paying $40 a month, but there was a data cap where this thing's going to slow down. And I'd rather have a kiddo, if they're going to be remote the whole year, $40 unlimited. One
of the things that Jen did this last week, because we were having problems with our AT&T Khajiits, she went out to the vendor and said, look, these have not been what we needed them to be. We paid for 4 months of this and really didn't get what we expected. They've come back and said, we will upgrade to the better quality hotspots, and we will give you 4 months free for the 4 months that you had paid, and then we're looking at beyond that. So she's just sent me that
Okay.
quote now. I haven't had a chance to look at the whole thing, but they have acknowledged that, yep, we're going to upgrade you on this.
And that's on the
And take care of
AT&T
it.
side. of what-
That was on, well, it's the Khajiits. They're saying, we're going to pull out the AT&T and give you this more solid Verizon ones.
Okay.
So we'll look to see where that is. There are a few places that Verizon isn't as strong in town, but for the most, but it's a more robust system, so it may hit the towers a little better too.
So the next thing on our agenda was the CARES Act report.
And I do not have that fully complete. I had gotten the last pieces in. The majority of the pieces that have changed since what you've seen before, and I will get that up to you, is the fact that I have put in the additional pieces for Larry's section. I did take out a few pieces that we've not spent and I'm not seeing are as high a priority right now. One was tents, those sorts of things. We've had some people who have made offers to potentially donate some of those, and rather than try to put those into the CARES Act, okay, we're gonna look here because we're getting into colder weather, that's probably not gonna be our biggest need right now.
I missed your description. What were you saying? Did you say tent?
I said, like the pop-ups to have for shelter,
Okay.
for outside
The only
classes.
problem with those under the assembly permit is they have to be the fire retardant and approved by the chief.
They have to be fire retardant, and we can't put them together so that we exceed a certain square footage, otherwise they become a structure. So we need, I've had the conversation with the chief.
So we've just gotten briefed on the CARES Act, and basically we have $600 left. I think the board's got a pretty good understanding of where the money went. I don't see that that's a big rush getting to the board. I think we got enough on our.
No, I think it just needs to be. in a-
That was the piece that went as I was spending
Yeah.
quality time with DHHS, but,
Yeah, I think we just need to kind of get that in the future.
yep, no,
Let's
I will
put
get
on
that to you.
file.
We've addressed the joint meeting, which will be next week at 6 o'clock with the selectmen. And then I think we should set the agenda tentatively to be back here at 7.
Just on the joint meeting, can we make sure an email goes out to Stan where he's not here, so he's
Yes.
aware of that change?
Yep.
And we can do it by call, but I just want him to be aware of the time change.
Any new business? Tim, you got any new business? I made a note here, but I don't understand it, so.
Let's know, it's not just me.
I'm good.
Joel or Josh, any new business?
No, thank you. No.
Next thing on our agenda is public participation. Do we have any members from the public that have any questions, concerns?
Just before we go into non-public, under personnel, can we have a session under I for safety and security and get a briefing on Valley View School and the class shutdown?
Can we do,
non-public.
can we do personnel first, because
Yep.
you requested Diana to be here, and then we'll-
I forgot she was here, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
She's hiding in the back.
But yes.
And I think, yeah, we can excuse,
Okay.
yep, I'm good with that.
Yeah, okay, that's just an update regarding our,
I just don't want that to be
Nope.
missed.
So not hearing any questions from the public, I'd like to thank everyone for attending the meeting in person or live, and I'll make a motion to go into non-public session in RSA 91A23 to ABC personnel.
Second.
Seconded by Joel. Any discussion? Not hearing any?
Aye.
All in
Aye.
favor? Aye.